Most people believe the hero's journey begins with a call to adventure, a grand summons to leave the ordinary world behind. But what if I told you that the most profound journey actually begins with refusal? Not the refusal of the call itself, but the refusal to remain unconscious in a world that demands your spiritual sleep. This isn't about rejecting life or becoming a hermit in some distant cave. This is about recognizing that the deepest adventure lies not in conquering external dragons, but in awakening to the mechanical nature of your own existence. You've felt it, haven't you? Those moments when you're sitting in a meeting, nodding along to conversations that feel scripted, watching people play roles they've never consciously chosen, participating in rituals whose meaning dissolved long ago. Joseph Campbell spoke of the hero who refuses the call to adventure, but there's another refusal that precedes this moment, the refusal to sleepwalk through life. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. You start noticing the scripts, the way people ask, "How are you?" without wanting an answer, the way conversations follow predictable patterns, like dancers performing choreography they learned in childhood but never questioned. You see the masks everyone wears, the personas carefully constructed to fit into society's narrow definitions of success, happiness, fulfillment. This awakening feels dangerous because it is dangerous. When you begin to see the mechanical nature of human behavior, including your own, you realize you're living in what Campbell called the wasteland, not a physical place, but a psychological terrain where authentic life has been buried under layers of conditioning, expectation, and unconscious repetition. The hero's journey traditionally begins when the protagonist receives a supernatural call, but this journey begins with something far more unsettling, the recognition that most of life is lived on autopilot. You notice how people respond to certain triggers with predictable emotions, how they chase goals they've never examined, how they form opinions based on inherited beliefs rather than direct experience. You see families perpetuating patterns across generations, societies worshipping symbols whose original meaning has been forgotten, individuals sacrificing their deepest longings for acceptance in communities that are themselves lost. But here's where this refusal becomes a different kind of call to adventure. When you refuse to participate unconsciously in the mechanical dramas of everyday life, when you refuse to sleepwalk through your days, you discover that consciousness itself becomes your special world. This isn't the special world Campbell described in traditional myths, the enchanted forest or the underworld realm. This is the recognition that awareness, presence, authentic being, these constitute a realm as foreign and challenging as any mythical landscape. The ordinary world, you realize, is not your family home or your familiar city. The ordinary world is unconsciousness itself, the state of being where you react rather than respond, where you live according to programs rather than presence, where you mistake your conditioned personality for your true self, and the call to adventure isn't a messenger or a crisis or a mentor appearing at your door. The call is the growing discomfort with living mechanically, the increasing inability to participate wholeheartedly in conversations and activities that feel empty of genuine meaning. This refusal to remain asleep creates its own form of exile. You find yourself standing at the edge of gatherings, not because you think you're superior, but because you can no longer pretend that small talk satisfies your hunger for real connection. You watch people compete for prizes that seem increasingly hollow, invest emotional energy in dramas that repeat with minor variations, seek happiness in acquisitions and achievements that provide only temporary relief from a deeper unease. Campbell understood that the hero's journey often begins with separation from the tribe, but this separation isn't geographical, it's psychological. It's the recognition that you can no longer find your identity in the roles society offers, can no longer derive meaning from the myths your culture takes for granted. You become a stranger in your own life, not because you've gone anywhere, but because you've started seeing everything differently. This is where the real adventure begins. Not with swords and quests and external enemies to vanquish, but with the far more challenging journey into the depths of your own unconscious patterns, your own mechanical responses, your own inherited stories about who you are and what life means. The dragon isn't out there in some distant cave. The dragon is the automation of consciousness itself, the way awareness goes to sleep and lets life be lived by committee, by all the voices and expectations and programs you've collected along the way. What Campbell called the refusal of the call takes on deeper meaning when you understand that most people spend their entire lives refusing the call to consciousness. They refuse it not once, but moment by moment, day by day, choosing familiar numbness over the vulnerability of awakened presence. But when you can no longer refuse, when the discomfort of living mechanically becomes greater than the fear of living authentically, you cross what Campbell described as the threshold into the special world. This threshold isn't a physical doorway. It's the moment you choose consciousness over conditioning, presence over performance, authentic being over unconscious reaction. And like the traditional hero crossing into the realm of adventure, you discover that this new world operates by different laws. In the mechanical world, success is measured by accumulation, status, approval from others. In the realm of consciousness, success is measured by the depth of your presence, the authenticity of your responses, the degree to which you're living from your essential self rather than your conditioned personality. The isolation Campbell described as part of the hero's journey becomes literal here. When you stop participating in the collective trance, when you refuse to pretend that meaningless activities have meaning, when you can no longer engage wholeheartedly in conversations that dance around the surface of life without ever touching its depths, you find yourself alone in crowds, connected to life but disconnected from the ways most people choose to live it. This loneliness isn't pathological, it's initiatory. Campbell understood that the hero must often journey alone, must face trials without the comfort of the familiar tribe, must discover resources within themselves they never knew existed. When you refuse to live mechanically, you enter your own version of what he called the belly of the whale, a period of apparent death where your old identity dissolves, but your new one hasn't yet emerged. You discover that most of what you thought was you was actually a collection of responses, preferences, and patterns you absorbed from your environment. The way you laugh, the subjects that interest you, the things you worry about, the goals you pursue, so much of it reveals itself as inherited rather than chosen, automatic rather than conscious. This recognition can be terrifying because it raises the question, if all of this conditioning isn't really me, then who am I? Campbell wrote about meeting the mentor, the wise figure who provides guidance for the journey ahead. In this inner adventure, consciousness itself becomes your mentor. Not consciousness as a concept or philosophy, but consciousness as a lived experience, the direct awareness of what's actually happening in this moment, beneath all the stories and interpretations and automatic reactions. This mentor doesn't speak in words, but in presence, doesn't give advice, but offers the infinite patience of pure awareness. The tests and trials Campbell described in the traditional hero's journey become internal challenges here. Can you remain present when others are lost in mechanical drama? Can you respond authentically when everyone around you is performing scripts? Can you maintain connection to your essential self when the world rewards you for playing roles? Can you choose consciousness moment by moment, even when unconsciousness would be more comfortable, more familiar, more socially acceptable? But here's what makes this journey both more challenging and more rewarding than traditional adventures. Every moment offers an opportunity for heroism. Not the heroism of slaying external monsters, but the heroism of choosing awareness over automation, presence over performance, authentic response over conditioned reaction. The battlefield isn't in some distant realm. It's here now in this conversation, this decision, this moment of choice between living consciously or mechanically. If you've felt this call to consciousness, if you've experienced the isolation that comes with refusing to live on autopilot, I want you to know you're not alone in this journey. There's a community of people who understand what it means to awaken in a sleeping world, who know the challenges of living authentically in a culture of performance. Subscribe not just to this channel, but to your own deepest knowing. Comment below and tell me about your own moment of awakening, your own refusal to remain unconscious. Let's create a space where those who have crossed the threshold can recognize each other, where the lonely journey of consciousness becomes a shared adventure. The path ahead isn't about rejecting the world or becoming superior to those who haven't awakened. Campbell understood that the hero's ultimate task is to return to the ordinary world with the gifts discovered during the journey. But first, you must fully embrace the ordeal of consciousness, the challenge of living authentically in a world that often rewards performance over presence. Campbell spoke of the ordeal at the heart of every hero's journey, that moment when the adventurer faces their greatest fear, their most challenging opponent, the test that will either destroy them or transform them completely. In the journey of consciousness, this ordeal isn't a single dramatic moment, but a sustained confrontation with the mechanical nature of your own mind, the automatic patterns that have been running your life below the threshold of awareness. The ordeal reveals itself in seemingly ordinary moments. You're in conversation with someone you love, and you notice yourself responding from a script rather than from presence. You catch yourself performing emotions rather than feeling them, offering opinions you've never examined, pursuing goals that belong to your conditioning rather than your authentic desires. The dragon you face isn't external. It's the automation of consciousness itself, the way awareness goes to sleep and lets life be lived by committee. This confrontation with your own unconsciousness is more challenging than any external enemy because you can't fight it with traditional weapons. You can't defeat automatic patterns through force or will or determination. The only way through is radical honesty, moment-by-moment awareness, the willingness to see how mechanical you've been without judgment, how much of your life has been lived on autopilot without condemnation. Campbell understood that the hero often faces this ordeal alone, and the journey of consciousness amplifies this solitude. Friends and family members who are still living mechanically can't understand why you're no longer satisfied with surface conversations, why you can't pretend enthusiasm for activities that feel empty, why you've stopped participating wholeheartedly in dramas that once consumed your attention. They may accuse you of being withdrawn, judgmental, or difficult, not recognizing that you're engaged in the most challenging adventure possible, the journey into authentic being. But within this apparent isolation, you discover something Campbell called the sacred marriage, not with another person, but with consciousness itself. You begin to recognize that awareness is always present, always available, always offering the possibility of authentic response rather than mechanical reaction. This isn't a philosophical concept, but a lived reality. The direct experience of being awake in a world of sleepers, present in a culture of performance, authentic in an environment of conditioning. The loneliness transforms. What initially felt like disconnection reveals itself as a deeper kind of connection, not to the roles people play, but to the essential being that exists beneath all roles. You start recognizing others who have made this same journey, not through what they say or do, but through the quality of their presence. There's an immediate recognition, a wordless understanding between those who have refused to live mechanically. Campbell wrote about allies on the hero's journey, companions who share the adventure and provide support during challenging moments. In the realm of consciousness, these allies appear not as fellow warriors but as fellow awakeners, people who understand the cost of choosing awareness over automation, authenticity over performance, presence over conditioning. Sometimes they appear as teachers, sometimes as friends, sometimes as strangers whose very being radiates the possibility of living consciously. The reward Campbell described, the elixir or treasure that justifies the entire journey, reveals itself not as something you acquire, but as something you remember. The treasure was always here, hidden beneath layers of conditioning, waiting to be rediscovered. It's the simplicity of being present, the freedom of responding authentically, the peace of no longer trying to be someone else. It's the recognition that consciousness itself is the most precious gift, and it's always been available, always been yours. But like Campbell's hero, you discover that possessing the treasure isn't the end of the journey. The question becomes, how do you live this awareness in a world that largely operates unconsciously? How do you maintain presence in environments designed to promote mechanical response? How do you offer the gift of consciousness without forcing it on others who aren't ready to receive it? This is where the journey becomes truly sacred, not because you've escaped the ordinary world, but because you've learned to bring consciousness into every ordinary moment. If this resonates with the adventure you're living, if you recognize yourself in this description of the inner hero's journey, know that your willingness to live consciously is a gift not just to yourself, but to everyone who encounters your presence. Share your own experiences in the comments, moments when you chose awareness over automation, presence over performance. Let's acknowledge each other as fellow travelers on this most essential of all adventures. The return that Campbell described awaits, but it's unlike any return you might expect. You're not coming back from a distant land, but coming back to this moment, this breath, this opportunity to choose consciousness over conditioning, authentic being over mechanical response. Campbell's final stage, the return of the hero to the ordinary world, takes on profound meaning when your adventure has been internal rather than external. You don't return from a distant realm because you never left this one. Instead, you return to the same conversations, the same relationships, the same daily activities, but you inhabit them differently. You bring consciousness to situations that once triggered automatic responses, presence to interactions that once provoked mechanical reactions. This return isn't about preaching the insights you've gained or trying to wake others who are still sleeping. Campbell understood that the hero's gift must be offered carefully, with wisdom rather than force, with compassion rather than superiority. You discover that consciousness is contagious not through words, but through being, not through explanations, but through the quality of your presence. People may not understand why conversations with you feel different, why they leave your company feeling somehow more awake, more alive, more themselves. The mastery Campbell described, becoming equally at home in both worlds, reveals itself as the ability to live consciously within unconscious systems, to maintain authentic being while participating in environments that often reward performance, to choose presence moment by moment, even when surrounded by people operating on autopilot. This isn't about becoming perfect or beyond human struggles, but about bringing awareness to whatever arises, responding authentically even when automatic reactions would be easier. You discover that the mechanical world continues operating around you, but you're no longer trapped within its logic. People still chase external validation, still compete for empty prizes, still participate in dramas that repeat with minor variations across generations. But now you see these patterns without judgment, recognizing them as expressions of unconsciousness rather than personal failings. The compassion Campbell spoke of, the hero's ultimate gift, emerges naturally when you recognize that everyone is doing their best given their level of awareness. The freedom Campbell described as the hero's final reward manifests as the ability to choose your response in each moment rather than being controlled by conditioning, circumstances, or the unconscious expectations of others. This freedom doesn't mean you can control external events, but that you're no longer at the mercy of automatic reactions to those events. You respond rather than react, create rather than simply consume, participate in life rather than being lived by it. But perhaps the most profound discovery is that this journey never truly ends. Every moment offers a choice between consciousness and conditioning, between authentic response and mechanical reaction. The hero's journey becomes not a single adventure, but a way of living, a commitment to awareness that must be renewed moment by moment, day by day. The call to adventure arrives fresh each morning with the simple question, will you live today consciously or mechanically? Campbell recognized that some heroes choose to remain in the special world rather than return with their gifts. In the realm of consciousness, this temptation manifests as spiritual bypassing, using awareness as an escape from engagement rather than as a foundation for deeper participation in life. The true completion of this journey requires bringing consciousness into the most ordinary moments, the most challenging relationships, the most mundane activities. You realize that your refusal to live mechanically wasn't a rejection of life, but a deeper embrace of it. By refusing to sleepwalk through your days, you've discovered what it means to be fully alive. The conversations may be the same, but you're present for them. The work may be the same, but you bring consciousness to it. The relationships may involve the same people, but you show up authentically rather than performing expected roles. This is what Campbell meant when he spoke of the freedom to live. Not freedom from life's challenges and uncertainties, but freedom within them. The freedom to meet whatever arises with presence rather than panic, wisdom rather than worry, authentic response rather than automatic reaction. The freedom to be yourself fully, regardless of whether others understand or approve. The journey that began with refusing to remain unconscious completes itself in the recognition that consciousness itself is both the path and the destination. Every moment of presence is both the journey and the arrival. Every choice for awareness over automation is both the adventure and the return. You haven't become someone different. You've remembered who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning. And in that remembering, you offer the world the most precious gift possible, the living demonstration that it's possible to be awake in a sleeping world, authentic in a culture of performance, present in an age of distraction. You become what Campbell called the eternal hero, Not someone who completed an adventure once, but someone who chooses the adventure of consciousness moment by moment, day by day, for the rest of their life.